She's actually in her office every day working 70 hours a week, advising the commissioner as the chief legal counsel on what the heck Massachusetts is going to do. So we've had a busy time. I've been homebound, of course, not doing usual traveling and counseling, coaching principals, but trying to keep the Marshall Memo relevant to all of you. And by the way, if you don't get the memo, just get in touch with Mark or Jim and sign up, because it's part of the SAM deal, right? So some thoughts here. Just first of all, just echoing what was just said, is the incredible heroics of educators across the country. Not everybody. There's some people who really have dropped the ball, and there was one article in the New York Times about comparing a class in Philadelphia with a class in I believe in Chicago, and the Chicago teacher had 100% of her kids online, first graders, and the Philadelphia teacher had 40%. So not everybody. But we've turned around on a dime, and as it was just said, and again, especially hats off to people who have children at home. This has been really pretty crazy to then, along with that, we've had this nationwide reawakening on race, sort of making things much more challenging and complicated, although this really does feel like something of a turning point here. I think I've heard again and again. So to say the least, there's a lot going on. So I just got this quote in this week's memo: "The pandemic is one season in our lives. It will end. It will be remembered as an extraordinarily difficult time, but the slow process of returning to a new normal, of naming our grief, helping one another reach acceptance, and finding meaning will continue." I think that's sort of got me thinking and putting this in perspective, because this will be over, but this coming year is going to be something. So can everyone please grab your cell phone? We're going to use Poll Everywhere, which is a little more robust than the Zoom poll. So go to texting on your cell phone, okay? Go to text, and in the, make a new text as if you're doing a new text, and then put in the to box 37607, and then in the message box, Kim Marshall 346, Marshall with 2 L's, don't worry about capitals, Kim Marshall 346, and then hit send. And that is going to hook you up to this Poll Everywhere thing, okay? So go ahead and do that. I'll just give you a moment here to do that. Hit send with the 37607 and the 2, and the Kim Marshall 346 in the message. Hit send, and then you're registered. You'll get a little bit of a response just saying you're registered, okay? And by the way, I've done a study of this, and some of my colleagues have. Poll Everywhere is the best software to use for polling in a remote setting, and also the best for getting your polling questions into a PowerPoint presentation. It's a little complicated to get used to, and in service of that, I have done a 3-page checklist for PC and for Mac. And if you're curious, if you want to help your colleagues get up to speed with Poll Everywhere, I will be happy to send that to you. Okay, so here's our first Poll Everywhere question. Word splash, 2 words describing your state of mind right now. Just put in as a text. Okay, so I'm going to put in my word first here and hit send with the first word. And then I'm going to put in my second word here and keep it to 1 word. And just go ahead and send those in, and we'll give you a little time here. And as with all these Poll Everywhere things, you can always, if a word gets more than 1 mention, it gets bigger. So you see hopeful has just gotten a little bit bigger, so that's cool. So keep putting your words in. And if there's anyone who arrived just in the last minute or two, go to the chat box, chat function to see the directions, which for getting your texting live, so you can put in your text. So what have we got so far? Anxious is big, frustrated, next in line, hopeful, about the same valence there. Got a whole lot of other words here. Fired up, who said fired up? Exhausted, stressed, collaborative, blessed, positive, reflective, peace, determined, energized, empty. We got all kinds of words here. So the top so far, take another 15 seconds to get your 2 words in here. Frustrated, hopeful, anxious are the biggies so far. Uncertain. I'd say the positive words are not coming up quite as strong as the negative at this point. And this is indeed an unbelievably stressful time. It may feel like summer, but it's not really summer right now. So, okay, another 10 seconds, go ahead. We're gonna save these words here. And so I believe Jim will be able to send a full set of slides to you with all these words. Wow, very interesting indeed. So let's go to the substance here. And I do have some substance. So the topic that Mark asked me to talk about is what we learned during the COVID-19 crisis that we can do better. And here's one thing that we've learned, which is some kids have become incredibly creative. I don't know how many of you have seen Chloe Langford playing 4 musical instruments and singing this song all day long. If you want to get the link to this Vimeo, go to Marshall Memo 835, or just go to the link there, which is kind of long. And then the students at EL Education went ahead and did this incredible ensemble, and I have no idea. So this is something we didn't know how to do before, or if we did, no one was using it. So look at these kids here and all these EL schools around the country putting together this incredible thing, Make the World Better. It starts off with the young woman in the top left-hand corner. She's joined by a singer, and then all these other kids chime in. Some of them are snipping scissors, some of them are playing violins. It's unbelievable. And then the professionals got into the act. This is the Juilliard musicians playing Bolero. Again, if you haven't seen this, I highly, highly recommend it. Just go to YouTube and put in Juilliard Bolero. And you got some real top flight musicians, Yo-Yo Ma, all kinds of other people playing here. And then we got sort of political substance. So Oprah Winfrey did this discussion with a number of Black intellectuals, politicians, journalists, and so forth. And so this is a new art form. So this is just very dramatically, this is something we learned. So here's my list. Here are my 10 things. And I'm not going to read it from here because I've done just this morning, just for you, I've done a separate slide for each one. So number 1 is sleep for teenagers. One of the big things that's come across during the pandemic is kids have been able to sleep later. And it's reminded us of the research that we've known for a long time, which is high schools and middle schools should not open before 8:30. So if ever there was a time to take school districts, shake them by the lapels and say, for Pete's sake, let's open our schools later so we don't have sleepy kids, car accidents in the afternoon, all kinds of mischief happening, et cetera, et cetera. So that's number 1. And by the way, when I finish my list, we're gonna ask you to chime in with anything I'm missing, and Mark may be my interlocutor. So number 2 is team collaboration. So again, we had our PLC meetings before and so forth. But during the pandemic, we've been forced to really collaborate at a deeper level and also collaborate better with families. And so I think it's going to get better when we go back. It's this kind of, and look at there, they've got the candy, they've got the software, they've got the kids' work and everything. That's the real name of the game. And that can happen. So my third thing is, when is in-person instruction really vital? So here we have Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. And in this kind of situation, you got to be there in person. But there are other things where remote instruction actually works better, is more efficient. And that's something we've learned during the pandemic, is when to do which. And I think we have a really clear picture of this. Again, we don't know how we're going to open in the fall, but we got to use the synchronous and the asynchronous strategically. So the fourth thing is checking for understanding. Now, this is a picture I've had for a while of using dry erase boards. And look at this high school class here where the teacher is checking in on a graph and can immediately see. So this is super low tech, but what we're using with the Poll Everywhere, that's pretty high tech. So whether we're online or in person, synchronous or asynchronous, teachers, I think, have gotten a clear message that they've got to constantly check for understanding. So I had a conversation yesterday with an old friend of mine, a principal in Connecticut, and he said he had this algebra teacher in 8th grade who said, things are going great, things are really terrific. And so my friend, the principal, tuned in on his Zoom class, and he was lecturing for 45 minutes. So come on, we've learned this. We knew it before. The researchers have told us this. We've got to constantly check for understanding and fix learning problems in real time. So differentiation, the big bugaboo, something that really bugs a lot of teachers because they're told to do it and no one is really clear. So the old thinking on that is you've got to differentiate by content, process, and product. That's Carolyn Tomlinson's formulation. I think that's a formulation for a university professor. For someone in the front lines, I think the 3 big questions are, what should students be learning in this lesson? What is the best way to teach it? Is it a movie? Is it a hands-on experience? Is, what is it? And then checking for understanding to see if all students are learning. And then dividing the energy and creativity of teachers and principals across these 3. So we're front-loading with really good lessons that get at the objectives. We're constantly executing effectively and checking for understanding. So look at this teacher down on her knees, checking in with this kid. And then we're following up, often with team meetings, looking at data and following up. So that's my quick take on differentiation. We've got to do better at this, and we've learned how to do better. So then more projects and experiential learning. We've kind of been forced to do this during the pandemic, of course, but we've known this all along, and some teachers have been doing this heroically all along, but we know much better now. We've got to get kids more with their hands on, even if it's virtual. Number 7 is when we're giving writing and projects, commenting and not getting grades. Doug Reeves has been very strong on this one too. As soon as you give a grade, the kid sort of tunes out and looks at the grade and often doesn't look at all these comments that we've written. Number 8, and our son in Seattle has used this a lot, is getting visitors, artists, politicians, journalists, leaders of all kinds, to come into the classroom virtually. We really weren't using this much before. We're putting energy into bringing in visitors in person, but not so much in person. So here's Vanna White coming into a university class. Let's do this, let's do more of this. So one of the most disturbing articles that I saw in the Marshall Memo over the last 4 months was an article, an op-ed piece in the New York Times by a young 8th grader, a girl, who said that she really preferred learning at home because in her classrooms, the kids are out of control, were rolling around on the floor, hitting each other, disrespecting the teacher. In a New York City public school, 8th grade. What a disgrace. What a disgrace that that principal wasn't in that class helping those teachers do a better job at classroom management. So I think when we got the message here that we cannot allow mediocre and poor teaching to fly under the radar, we got to get into those classrooms much more frequently. And my last one is, what's the big picture goal here that's really jumped out at us during the pandemic, which is it's all about independence. It's all about kids becoming more independent. So when they get to high school, when they get to university, when they get to community college, when they get to the military, when they get to a job, they're able to function by themselves. I love this picture. Something about this picture just says she's learned how. Okay, so we have a poll over a question here. Is which of these would be on your list? So with your cell phone, again, just put in a letter, and you can have as many of these letters as you want. Hit send after each letter. And if you're a late arriver, go to the chat box and you'll see the directions about how to log your texting function on your cell phone into this poll everywhere function. So check out the list. This is exactly the sequence in which I did the list. And just click any letters that you think would be sort of high on your list, in your school, with your colleagues to get better at in ways that we've learned during the pandemic. So I'll shut up and let people respond here. And again, you can hit as many letters as you want. Put the letter in the text and send it as a text, and just keep going. And with all the ones that would be on your sort of primo list for when schools reopen. Take another 15 seconds to get your responses in. So it looks like that check-in for understanding is a strong first place with this, and maybe the image of that algebra teacher lecturing for 45 minutes haunted you. And by the way, during his lecture, he probably said a few times, any questions? You guys good with this? Okay. So what's number 2 here? Comments not great on some work. Of course, with exams and with finals, we're gonna have to get grades, but with formative work, comments not grades. We got a tie when in-person works and when remote works best, and also rethinking differentiation. I do have an article about that, by the way. If I'm fleshing out in more detail, you can get that on the memo website. Mediocre teaching addressed. Don't let it fly under the radar. Okay, so that's a pretty interesting thing. And again, we're saving these, but really think about these. So let's pause here. And anyone in the chat or Mark, you want to chime in with anything that you are particularly interested in this list, or do you think is missing from the list? I've got a pad of paper here to write down ideas.
Jim, I think the list is really helpful. A question that came up on the chat box was, how do you do evaluation, teacher evaluation? What have we learned about doing that in March, April, May, and June? I think I know your answer, but how do you address that?
Well, I think if ever there was a time for short, unannounced visits, this is the time. If we're online, doing hybrid, we've got to drop into those classrooms and get a feel for how it's going. Obviously, the classroom management online is going to be less challenging, but think of that algebra teacher lecturing. Think of people who are not in touch with their kids. Think of teachers who only have 40% of their kids online. So absolutely vital for principals, assistant principals, department heads, coaches to be constantly checking in with teachers, not in an officious way, not to fire them, but to just check in and see how things are going and support them in ways that will make things run better for the kids.
So Kim, just to push a little bit, if you were a principal again and I was one of your teachers and I said, stay out of my Zoom, I don't want you coming in, what would you say to me?
I'd say, Mark, suck it up. This is part of the deal. I'm your principal, and I've got to be able to give quality assurance to all the parents. That's a Charlotte Danielson term, by the way, quality assurance. And I can't do that just by taking things on trust. So Mark, get used to it. And actually, the wonderful stuff you're doing in your classroom, Mark, would really be of interest to a lot of colleagues, and maybe even you should write an article about it. So other thoughts, comments from the chat, or anyone else want to chime in here? So I'm hearing crickets. Okay, so let's move on. I do have 4 recommended articles for you here on leaders in a time of crisis. The first one is my favorite here, Barry Jensen, Jerry Murphy. How can a leader admit confusion and still lead? Wonderful article. You can find it in the memo archive on memo 70, and also in the book. If you have the book, The Best of the Marshall Memo, it's on page 72. The other one's there. You may know, if you're memo readers, that every week I'm updating the full set of ideas from all the memos so far about COVID-19. And this is updated yesterday. You notice there's a section of quotes, a section of articles about understanding the pandemic, articles on the human side. And so you can find this on the memo website. Don't have to log in, just go to Kim's published writing and it's right there. So one more list, we have time, 1 more minute, and I'll quickly zip through another list here, and then we'll pause for our breakout rooms. Is before the kids show up, whether it's virtually or not, there are several things that I think are really important. First of all, checking in with our colleagues. How are you doing? Because we're going to have people in 3 different categories. First, people for whom this was an inconvenience, but not a big deal. You know, I miss going to restaurants. People who have gotten sick themselves, like Mark Schellinger, who actually recovered from the virus. And then the third category is people who have actually lost colleagues or loved ones. So 3 different levels, checking in, hiring, doing a really good job of hiring, and getting lots of tutors, getting those college graduates who don't have a job into the school for tutoring, talking up looping, talking up the idea of teachers keeping their kids from last year into this year, forming effective teacher teams, going after those hidden leaders that are out there, and also helping the lonely singletons, that one physics teacher in a high school, find other physics teachers in other schools, because now we're so good at getting together online, deciding on what the power standards are, what those key must-do standards are for the coming school year, getting teachers who've learned to do things effectively to share with others, having good PD sessions before the year begins. Definitely finding those lost students. Who were those kids that we never got in touch with? Did they move out of state to live with grandparents? Are they ashamed of their home? Do they not have internet access? And that's the last one, is making sure that every single kid has robust technology and internet access. So one final poll Everywhere question here. What would be your top three of the list that I've just gone through? It's taking a little time to come up here. Wait for the letters. Your top 3. So read through the list and wait for the letters to pop up here. They got to pop up before we do this. Just sometimes it's a little bit slow with the internet connection. Hold on 1 sec. Think of your top 3 of these. This is the weeks before school begins. No, we don't have letters yet. So think of your top 3, and I'm out of time now. So Mark, you have had some coffee break people who have actually gone beyond their 20 minutes, but I don't do that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and get ready for the breakout rooms.
Kim, I think you're terrific. I really appreciated and enjoyed this session. I also want to follow up on one thing before we go to breakout rooms. Maybe there's an opportunity here in terms of moving from evaluation to improvement. And so instead of thinking of the principal's role of evaluation, maybe it's a time where we can, just like we're not thinking so much about testing kids, we don't have to think so much about testing teachers. And maybe we can talk with teachers about, let's go back to what it should be. Let's use this as a golden opportunity to, when I come in and talk with you, that we're going to talk about how we can be better together, but not in an evaluative sense. And
love it. I love it. So the worst mistake would be to be scoring the teachers on a rubric, or to be giving 4, 3, 2, 1 ratings about a lesson. Use it as an opportunity for coaching. Now, if you do come across really terrible teaching or abusive teaching, then you do evaluate at that point, right? But Mark, I think you're giving the model that for 98% of teachers, it's all about coaching, appreciation, affirmation of things that people are doing well, but not scoring. I totally agree.
Yeah, one of the SAM principals the other day sent me a email that was an exchange. He forwarded an email, was an exchange with one of his teachers. And his teacher was saying how much she appreciated the fact that he had sent an email to her simply asking how she was doing. How are you doing this summer? I know it's been stressful. Just wanted to check in with you to see how you're feeling.
Yeah.
It meant the world to her that she got that kind of response from her principal. You know, what's fascinating to me is so much of this is just so applicable to whether we're in a remote or a in-person exchange with people.
Yeah.
Is how do you connect with people to help them move forward? We see right now lots of people putting chat items on the chat box right now. Thanking you, Kim. I'll make a copy of this and send it to you. Any closing words before we go ahead and move into the breakout rooms?
Well, one thing, speaking of, checking in, last week's memo, 843, had a wonderful lead-off article about the stages of grief, the 6 stages of grief applied to this era that we're in right now. Absolutely terrific article. That's actually where the quote came from. And by the way, if any of you are not getting the Marshall memo, definitely email Mark or Jim, because it's a free part of the SAM program. Most people get it, but if you don't get it, then please log in and I can be sending you this. And there's just, you know, the memo has been like 60 or 70% about the racial issue in America and about COVID over the last 3 months. So there's lots of relevant stuff, but also lots of long-term stuff. So thank you, Mark.
No, and thank you, Kim. And Kim is being, it doesn't tell you that he gives us a great deal in order to be able to offer the Marshall memo to you. We would never be able to afford it if, we wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise. But he is really pointing out that if you're not getting it and you're a SAM team member, let us know. We'd be happy to provide it for you. It is terrific. I will tell you that I always open it first thing. I skim it, Kim. I see, is there something here I'm really interested in? And then I don't delete it if I think I'm not interested. Instead, I go back and look at it again the next day,
Well,
and I almost always find something. So I really appreciate it. It's a lot of work.
That you don't delete it, Mark. That made my day.
I don't. I think, well, let me save this. I want to look at it one more time. And I almost always find something that's helpful. Guys, as you know, in terms of our process, you can thank him by going ahead and putting in the chat box your thanks or comments. You can clap and show that you like it that way too, because he can see you. We're going to go to breakout rooms now. You don't have to participate in the breakout room if you don't want to. Most people talk in the breakout room about what they just heard, and they can share with other people, but you can talk about whatever you like. The breakout rooms will be open for about 20 minutes, and I'll give you a warning before I close the breakout rooms. We'll also send you a little bit later this afternoon a copy of the recording of the session you just heard and then or saw, and then we'll also send you links to a number of things, including how to sign up for the Marshall memo with us if you're not currently receiving it. We're getting ready to go to breakout rooms. Kim, thanks again, and the breakout rooms start right now.